Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sterling Live. Sterling goes live across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. So I'm very happy that everyone who's tuning in live right now or will watch the on-demand version later, very happy that you are here joining us today. So I'm sitting down with Steve Smith today. Steve is our managing director of our EMEA region, and our topic today it's a very good one. Like, I'm looking forward to this. So we are doing a quick view of a webinar we had last week. The title was Brexit: What Employers Need to Know. And I got to tell everyone watching right now, it was a hot webinar. And that is why we're doing this today, because Steve is going to provide a great overview of it and definitely let everyone know, what's going on there. So, Steve, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you go ahead and let the audience know a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Caitlin. Hi, everybody. Caitlin said it. I'm Steve Smith. I'm Managing Director of Sterling in the EMEA region. We have offices in the UK and across Europe and in the Middle East, people in all of those places too. And they all kind of roll to me, and we have a lot of fun helping our customers create really safe environments. And compliance is a really important part of that. And so this is where this webinar came from. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, again, thank you for joining me. Got a couple of hellos on LinkedIn. Hello, everyone. I know I posted on LinkedIn the other day that it always a pleasure to talk to you, Steve. So it really is. And someone said you're looking good. So good. Let's move forward with this. I know you're winding down on your day, so we had to wrap it up with a great Sterling Live episode. So thank you again for that. So I did want to just, a brief overview of this webinar. Like I did say before, it was definitely a popular one. It was a hot one. So last week we did host this webinar, Brexit: What Employers Need to Know. We hosted it with Fragaman LLC. So Steve, I'm just curious about an overview here. How did it go? And then just providing a brief overview of the webinar, and then also more importantly, why did we partner with an organization like Fragaman to put this on?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so yeah, you're right. The webinar went really well. Probably the best attended webinar we've seen in about 12 months out of the EMEA region. There were kind of over 700 people that signed up, and we've seen lots of people listening in on demand already as well. So lots of attention, which is great. Lots of engagement too, which is cool. We'll talk a bit about questions and stuff, I think, later on, but it was really good to have a totally engaged audience. In terms of what we covered, really we focused in on the new immigration system in the UK post Brexit. So we were thinking about people from the EU who are living in the UK. We were thinking about right to work checks and how they have changed since Brexit. We were thinking about how organizations sponsor to employ non-UK nationals to work in the UK going forward. And then we thought a little bit about some of the impacts on background checks as well post Brexit. And I tell you something, I was so happy that Fragaman were there, because we partnered with these guys a few times. So we had Naomi and Charlotte from Fragaman. They're an immigration specialist law firm. And so all of the really complicated, difficult stuff that everyone showed up for, they took care of.
Yeah,
so they were great. Like, I couldn't recommend listening back to the webinar highly enough. I was just kind of guiding everyone through it and did a little bit at the end, but really they stole the show. And we work with them because they've worked with us before. They always provide great content, and they're really good at taking complicated things and just kind of giving them back to us simply. So yeah, that's why.
Yeah, no, that is perfect. And I know you did touch briefly upon, kind of like some trending things right now, and, certain topics like changes to, the immigration system, things like that. So why else was it so popular? Like, why was it such a highly attended webinar and people are still engaging with us on it?
Yeah, well, I think as we closed out 2020, right, everyone was so excited for 2021. I think 2020 was this year of responding to change, and oftentimes that was so reactive, right? There was known change that people were trying to address, like responding to the pandemic, but there was in the UK all this unknown change as well that Brexit represented, because no one was quite sure what deal we were going to get and what the impact of that was going to be. So it was an unknown all year, and it really did go right to the wire. So clients had been preparing for different scenarios, but you couldn't really action any of those plans. And then you head into 2021, and you almost get this exhale of relief from customers that, okay, right, now at least I know what I need to change or do or address. And so I think people have just started to adapt to it, but there's a lot people don't know. That short timeline from the deal being done end of December to being in place like January 1st, like people are just trying to interpret now, okay, what needs to change? What do we need to do? Yeah. And I think this webinar really kind of scratched that itch of bringing it together in one place, letting people hear it, understand it, question it, and then hopefully take away and embed it in their organizations.
Yeah, that's great. And, again, congratulations to you and the team for executing, such a, tremendous webinar. And for those who are listening right now, once Steve and I are done talking today, a link to the on-demand version of the webinar will be across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube in the comment section. And I highly recommend going and checking out the entire thing. We're not giving away all the details on today's show. We're just giving you guys a little bit, but you do definitely want to watch the entire thing. So again, as I just said, once we are done talking live today on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, the on-demand version of the webinar will be in the comment section across those platforms. So we started off the webinar with a poll for our audience, and we asked them, how comfortable are you with the new UK immigration rules following the Brexit agreement? 2% of our audience said very comfortable. 41% said somewhat comfortable. 43% said not very comfortable. So that is our highest percentage of not very comfortable. And 14% responded unsure. So Steve, what are your just general thoughts of the reaction to this poll question?
Yeah, I think it plays back into what I was just saying about that kind of itch that everyone had to try and understand all the complexities of it. The timeline was so short. And so coming into this, I don't think people are very comfortable. Like when you put somewhat and not very together, when you're talking about a compliance topic, that's a big representation of the audience that really were coming into this in a not very comfortable place.
Yeah, and hopefully we are definitely able to address many things that they're not comfortable with and answer a lot of questions. So let's kind of pull back the layers a little bit and understand why people were, responding that way. Or even, the second most popular one was somewhat comfortable, so not fully there yet. So on the 31st of January in 2020, Brexit did happen. So we are now in February of 2021. So where are we now? And obviously we were going through and still are going through a pandemic, but last year being a big height of it, were there key milestones and events that happened post-Brexit that were impacted by COVID-19? So that was a lot. That was like two questions in one. So we'll break it up. Let's just answer, where are we now? You can answer that one first.
Yeah, well, I think so. I think the way that Brexit unfolded kind of adds to some of the complexity, right? So the Brexit happened on the 31st of January 2020. And so right at the beginning of last year, that it finally happened. And then we went into this transition year. So all the way through until December 31st, nothing really felt like it had changed. This opportunity to negotiate the ongoing relationship between the EU and the UK, set out new systems such as the immigration system that's kind of so high impact as well. And then 31st of December 2020, free movement from the EU to the UK ended. And so that new system is now in place, and the Brexit deal was done, which that gave clarity in a whole heap of areas, right? So we're focusing a lot more on immigration and right to work and things like that in this conversation, but actually businesses have been like watching eagerly to see, okay, where is this deal going to land, if it's going to land at all, and what preparation do I need to do? So there was all of that complexity. But even now, when it's all done, there's still this 6-month window between now and the end of June where people from the EU that are living in the UK can still be applying for settled status, which would preserve their rights to remain post the end of June as well. So it feels like Brexit happens and then there's always another thing to wait for, or like a transition period. There's always a transition period, but this is probably the most final that we can get. We are in a transition period as it relates to settled status, but apart from that, it's pretty much done.
Yeah, so you do say, pretty much done, and this kind of reverts back to the two-parter of the question that I asked you originally. So, the pandemic, like certain milestones, were they impacted or anything like that because of, the whole timeline in general, like certain things, like was it impacted because of the pandemic? Yeah,
I think personally, I think that the pandemic was just a huge distraction.
Yeah.
just a mega distraction. I don't think that necessarily things would have materially been different without the pandemic. Maybe Brexit would have had a higher focus throughout the year. Like it felt like we were sprinting to the end right at the last moment.
Right.
But I think that was mainly because the government was kind of responding to the pandemic all year as well, and there was a lot that was in play. And negotiations become harder in a situation like that as well, don't they? So I think really it was a very complex, challenging, distracting year, and like probably micro that down from a government in a country to many of us in our organizations, we probably all felt the same. Things that we were trying to achieve and plan to achieve in 2020, we kind of got a bit distracted by everything else that was going on.
No, definitely, for sure. So moving into the new UK immigration system, can you go ahead and provide our audience what this looks like, an overview of what it looks like?
Yeah, so the Fragment team would do this so much better than I do, but I just really high level.
Don't sell yourself short. You're good. You got this.
Yeah, we haven't done a legal disclaimer. We probably need to do that.
Don't just okay.
So the immigration system is points-based for employment. It looks fairly similar to other point-based immigration systems around the world. Australia have a points-based one as well. It's fairly similar. It doesn't have, sometimes a points-based system has like a target number with loads of different contributing factors. From what Fragment presented on the webinar, it looks fairly simple, which is good. There are points for skills, points for education, points for salary bands for roles that non-UK workers might be moving into. They also helpfully covered some of the kind of the other contexts of people moving into roles. So they talked about intra-company transfers, so transferring international workers to a UK entity. They also talked about graduates, so international students that graduate in the UK, how might they remain employed and living here? So they went through different scenarios for that as well. And then one that surprised me a little bit was the restrictions on business visitors as well. So they talk about the need to have entry clearance visas for anyone visiting for business for more than 6 months. So they were kind of the headlines on the immigration system and the different pillars that make it up, I guess. Yeah.
But definitely still important, for our audience to understand that. So thank you for that overview. So moving more into, so I know you said Fragment did a great job describing that. Well, moving into an area that Sterling is, I know you can provide a great explanation of what we're going to talk about now. So I want to talk about right to work. So the first question I do have for you is, what is the importance of right to work? And you definitely provide our audience with a little bit of a, definition of it as well.
Yeah, sure. So right to work is the process of checking that any individual being employed in the UK has the right documentation, the right status to be able to do that. So it's a way that employers can support the government to enforce immigration. There's an obligation on every employer to check right to work before they offer employment. And then there is a penalty fee. So there's a civil penalty fee of up to £20,000 if an illegal worker is found with an organisation. So it's kind of high stakes. Yeah. And this is why I think as well, especially when you think about the engagement of the audience, when something changes in the framework around right to work, it panics people a little bit. Because it's such a burden of responsibility and administration that there's a lot of downstream processes that need to be worked back out. So it's something that HR and talent professionals and compliance professionals in the UK, they deal with this every day. It's a component part of pretty much every background check as well.
So you briefly mentioned a little panic that some, workers can have, some employees and organizations can have. We definitely understand that, but Sterling is also here to help with a little bit of that panic for sure. So can you explain how Sterling's UK right to work verification does help here?
Yeah, sure. So it plays back to some of the other conversations you've had over recent months as well. Like identity for Sterling is a huge topic. It's something we're absolutely focused on and invested in. And my team partnered with our identity division to really kind of think again about how to help our customers with right to work. Because right to work, there's a statutory excuse that's required by the employer. So the employer always has to play a part in the right to work check. So our goal was to see how simple we could make it for them pre-hire, so that on the first day of employment, they literally are just confirming what we've already told them to be true. So what we decided to do was build a product that is really flexible. So we wanted to build the compliance framework behind the product to be really flexible. We did this on the basis that Brexit was undefined for all the reasons we've talked about already. And knowing that we would get to a day where suddenly we'd need to have something that works. And so we were able to configure the documents that are requested of an individual. We're able to guide them really simply through a data collection process. And we couple that with a kind of state-of-the-art biometric facial recognition identity process. So it's a really nice experience for every candidate going through it. We check that the person is who they say they are. We match their face to the documents that they're providing for their right to work. And behind the scenes, our customers can be confident that the documents we're asking for satisfy the requirements of right to work on that day. So if they change again, then we can change the back end so it's always working for the customer. So yeah, that's what we've launched. It went live in the last quarter of last year, and it's been working really, really well. And so when this happened with Brexit, we were able to just check the framework, make sure everything was right, and it was working perfectly. So yeah, really exciting stuff.
Yeah, ease a little bit of that panic that you discussed that some people are seeing, but it is great to see, the success so far since we have launched that. Anyone that is watching, listening right now, there's so much content. We have so much on, the UK right to work verification. So you can just head over to sterlingcheck.co.uk under the services section. You can see right to work, a lot more information on that. But thank you for that overview there.
No problem.
So during the webinar, we got a ton of questions from everyone who attended, and it was questions that were answered in real time. It was questions that we clearly need to follow up with because everyone was super engaged with this webinar. So I wanted to get from you, kind of like the overarching themes of the questions that were being asked from the audience members, pretty much like overview, but then also too, how does Sterling plan to, address these questions, or how did we address these questions, things like that?
Yeah, sure. Well, there were questions that came in around COVID-19. So especially around right to work. So when the pandemic hit, there wasn't the opportunity for people to see people face to face, which is one of the requirements with right to work. And so the Home Office in the UK kind of relaxed some of the requirements that were in place there. So there were lots of questions around, does this still stand now we're in 2021? How long will this go for? Like, what does the future look like? Then lots of questions around the whole right to work process and if there was possible to digitalize that as well. And then a lot of really specific scenario-based questions. So when I guided you through that, the kind of the pillars of the things that we talked about, the immigration system, like people were really engaged with very specific questions that relate to their employees, things like people moving from one location to another, lots of questions around the settled status. So people that have been living in the UK from Europe, for example, before Brexit, have the right to remain under the settled status scheme, but they need to apply for it. And there's this kind of uncertainty. You don't really know whether people have applied or not, and whether how hard to push or encourage them to do it, and is that discrimination if you're hiring without that assurance. So there were lots of kind of hiring compliance questions that were coming through, as well as, even edged towards taxation, and there was loads. It was as the questions were coming through, because I was facilitating the conversation as well, it was a little bit overwhelming, thinking, right, okay, there's a lot here. As a result, we're working with the Fragment team to pull together an FAQ that kind of summarizes some of those trends and picks out scenarios that people can look at and try and apply into their own context as well.
Yeah, throughout this conversation, it is just, great to hear like how engaged the audience was during this webinar, and how much, we were able to give back and answer questions, address concerns, and, how we're going to continue to do that moving forward. Because like you said, there was a lot of questions, a little bit overwhelming, but, Sterling and the Fragment team obviously here to help and, get these questions, concerns addressed. So Speaking of questions, if our audience does have any questions for Steve that I did not ask already, please go ahead and comment across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube if you do have any final questions here. But I did want to, I knew this was going to be a great conversation. I called it from the beginning, but I did want to gather just some, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think what I'm hearing when I'm talking to customers at the moment is, like I mentioned at the beginning, that kind of sigh of relief, but also this real kind of, there is a lot of work to do. And we've just been talking about this one facet of Brexit, that the impact post-Brexit for a lot of organizations is multifaceted. It impacts taxation and payroll, and like there's heaps of other compliance considerations as well. And I just think it's daunting, but at least the information is out there now. And there are webinars like the one that we've done, obviously, and there are plenty of other tools and resources. The team at Fragment have been great, and I'm sure there are others that can give advice. I just encourage people to reach out quickly, to try and get to the level of understanding that makes them comfortable, and would answer the kind of, totally comfortable in our poll. It's also a great time to consider your, if you're a HR or talent leader and you're thinking like, this is so much to do, like it creates more admin than the teams are used to, at the same time as every team is trying to be more efficient. Like it's a great opportunity to step back. Like, there are so many requirements that have come through, whilst at the same time we're all kind of bouncing out of 2020, reimagining the workplace and reimagining our organizations. Like I would just encourage you to take the requirements and the reimagining and just kind of do it together. And like, don't see the admin burdens as another thing the team have to plow through, but like, see if there's a service provider out there that can help. See if there's a partner you can lean on. See if there's a tech solution like what we were talking about with the right to work check, that just relieves some of that admin burden, drives greater efficiencies. Like this could actually be a win-win for a lot of organizations, rather than it feel like a mountain to climb. So yeah, that would be my top tip if it's worth anything.
I thought that was a great tip, great advice for our audience listening now. So that was such a great way to wrap this up. So great job there. So I truly did love our discussion today. And for all of those watching, again, on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, the on-demand version of this webinar, Brexit, What Employers Need to Know, partnered with Fragment, will be in the comment section. You can go and get the on-demand version. And like I had said earlier, I highly recommend that you do watch the full version. We just, gave you a little bit today. But Steve, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to our audience. We do go live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. And again, this is just a great show. Another week, another great guest. But Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Great to have been here.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.